This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps and Discipleship Pastor here at Southridge Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. And before we go any further, I want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed to this podcast, that you go ahead and do so. That way you don't miss out on any new content. This week, Pastor Scott, we're diving deeper into your Sunday teaching on biblical singleness as we continue our series of Selfish and Stupid. Kind of give some highlights for what you hope that people took away from this teaching, or what, the main thing that you want them to understand.
Yeah, so for single people, I hope that there was some encouraging and some challenging things. Mm-hmm. For married people, I hope that it helped. I hope there was the same for you, but also that it helps you understand biblical singleness. Because as I mentioned on Sunday, especially in Christian circles, single folks have not always been treated with the same level of respect, honor, dignity, and inclusion that they ought to be. When James talks about in chapter 2 of his letter, the sin of partiality. He's talking about the rich not favoring the poor and things like that in the church. Well, the modern version of that in a lot of ways would be how married folks seem to treat single folks. So I hope that we are equipped as a church, because we do have a decent amount of what I would consider single folks, which are not, I think I missed that in second service saying that, but I'm just talking about not married folks, because being married is a permanent situation outside of a couple of things we'll talk about later in this series, whereas engagement, nope. If you're engaged, you're going through the process, you're like, you know what? I have the slightest bit of doubt about this. I can still get out of it. Yeah. Dating, not a permanent situation whatsoever. And so you're still technically single until you're married.
Yeah.
And so we do have a good amount of people that fit that requirement. And so I hope that they were challenged and encouraged by the 5 points. Because that was my goal, was I do... Really, in every sermon, and I've said it before, my goal is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. I'm always trying to lead with grace and truth. And when it comes to singleness, I feel like sometimes you get one or the other. You either get a whole lot of truth and you end up hurt, or you get a whole lot of grace and you don't get challenged to grow and to maybe see or hear some things that you don't want to. So I hope that the sermon had a little bit of both of those for single folks, and a lot of understanding for married folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, within your first point, you talked about how some people are called and gifted to live single, from 1 Corinthians 7:7 that Paul shares about. But you also, within that, you said God will gift you for what he has called you to. Yep. And I think this was a beautiful point, because it does hit so many different levels. And we talked even further in our group about unpacking that verse and what it means for any season in our life.
Whatever season you're facing, whether it's singleness, whether it's marriage, whether it's a health concern, whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's a loss of a family member, whatever season you're in, Paul's making a theological claim in 1 Corinthians 7:7, going, whatever it is that you're facing, you have a God that's on your side that will give you whatever it is that you need to make it through, and to not even just make it through, but to even thrive in those seasons. Yeah. And whereas we would normally like to take whatever season we're in, if it's not the one that we want, and live as victims, we do have to see that even in those seasons that would not have been our choice, that you can still live victoriously in them, because whatever it is, it doesn't sound like you could be victorious if you have a health scare, but that God does. He gives you what you need to make it through and be sustained in those seasons. Same thing with singleness. I know some of our singles here, they are very, very pleased with their singleness. Yeah. And they don't want to date. They don't want to marry. They want their singleness, because it allows them great opportunities, like we talked about in point number 2. Yeah. I know singles, though, that their singleness is very painful to them, and it's not what they want. And so I want to encourage them to go, listen, God's with you in the middle of this, but also you don't have to live like a victim in this time just because things aren't going the way that you thought that they should go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's even more than that, like how you shared about how, singleness allows you to do a lot of things that married people can't do. Well, like my husband and I are going on a mission trip this summer, but we have several single people coming with us.
Yeah.
And what's cool is that like those points kind of married together in that moment for a few of them, where one in particular I can think about who felt called to go on this trip as a single young man. However, like was struggling financially, like lost his job in the midst of this and was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, because God called him, he gifted him what he needed to be able to do what he was calling him to do. And so his trip's paid for by someone. But also like, within that, you talked about that second point of celebrating things as well. And this is, I believe, something that is really important as well. Not just for single people, but for everyone. Like if you find yourself in a season and it's not the one you choose. Remembering to celebrate those people who maybe are in a different place than you. I had to do this with my miscarriage. I remember like there was a point where I was like not in a good place with it, and finding out some people who like weren't married or this or that were pregnant, and I was doing a study called The Comparison Trap by Sandra Stanley, and this was one of her points was instead of comparing, celebrate. And
we have a massive issue just across culture right now where we have no idea how to hold tension whatsoever, and that's all that this is the ability to hold tension, to go, I feel miserable right now because of my situation, but I don't have to make everyone else around me miserable, and I also don't have to miss out on the little things that might be happening because of the season that I went through. Like those, you don't actually have to do that, but we just live in a culture. This is why there's so much fighting and fussing and conflict, because we don't know how to hold tension whatsoever, to go, I'm in a rough spot, but I'm so happy for and like not just putting on a brave face, but like learning to genuinely find joy in the successes and the blessings of others, even though, hey, your time just hasn't come yet, or you're in a rough season. And until you learn to do that, again, it just makes you, like being single, if it hurts, it's very difficult. But you don't have to compound it by yourself being a difficult person.
Right.
Like that's not necessary. It's like, yes, they invited you to a wedding and you're single. And like some single folks immediately get offended by that. How dare they? And it's like, they included you. They thought about you. They want you to be there. They're not picking on you because you're single. Stop seeing everything through the lens of a victim and see that those people care for you. And then at the same time, you can also, hey, maybe when I get home from that wedding, I'm going to have a moment of introspection and it's going to hurt. And it's okay to do both of those things, to hold that tension of I can celebrate. Like one of the things I was talking about in point 2, you have this unbelievable freedom in the midst of your singleness. So if your singleness hurts, that's one thing. The other part is this unbelievable freedom. So you have a bunch of single people going on a mission trip. Their life is so much easier for them to be able to go and do that than yours and Anthony's. You and Anthony have 3 kids that you have to find someone to watch those kids. You have all these different things. You have 2 different jobs that now have to have, like when you're single, like don't be like, well, man, I wish I had those problems. Do you? Because you have like, it hurts to be alone, sure. But you can just go, hey, boss, I'm not going to be here on this week in June. I'm going on a mission trip. And there's no one else in the world that you are accountable to. After you take care of your work obligations, you are good to go. And so that's what you get to do. And then I also just mentioned the silly things. Like, don't, like, minimize the small victory of like, hey, when you get home in the evenings, you don't have to fight with anyone over the remote.
Right.
For what? Why not celebrate that until you get to a point where you can celebrate fighting with someone over it?
Yeah, like we have one TV in our house, and we do that kind of strategically because we don't want them in our rooms. Like we are very much about that, and so like there has been a season where like I just read because the TV is always taken by everybody else, and it's not that big of a deal to me. So I just read while everybody else is watching the TV, and so there's occasional times where I'm actually like awake later at night and everybody's in bed, and I'm like, wow, I get to watch a show, and it's really exciting for me. But
like okay, let's say if like when you're in a relationship, you have to cook for 2 people now, like. And then they have preferences, and they have things that they like, they don't like, and if they don't line up with what you don't like, then now you have to start factoring all these other. It's again, maybe there's moments where you go, man, I really wish I had someone to fight with over whether or not the Brussels sprouts made the house smell like garbage again.
Yeah,
that would be nice. But on the other side of it, why not just, since you're in it and it's hard enough, why not celebrate the fact that you don't have to fight with somebody over these things? If your goal is ultimately be married yet.
Yeah. Well, and I'll also say that, like, I've had those friendships where I've had the people who make me feel really bad anytime that, and they're the victim ones, like, when I talk about my situation. Like, if I were to share some kind of parenting struggle or struggle, tension that I'm having with my spouse or whatever, it would always be well, at least you have kids, or at least you have that. Like, just be thankful for that. And it's like, it's not that I'm not thankful for that. It's not that I don't love my children. It's not that I don't love my spouse. It's that life is still messy. Like, and there are still things that go on that it's hard. And so then it would make me not want to talk about those things with that friend. And ultimately it ruined those friendships.
Yeah.
Because of that. And so like, it's one of those things where when you get to that level where you are just in that victim mentality so much, like your relationships with other people will not be as good because of that.
And don't like, the other side of it is, yes, learn to celebrate the small things. But then let me talk to married people. Do the same for your single friends.
Yes.
Don't constantly go asking them when they're going to get a significant other in their life, or when they're going to go and get married, or when you're going to start dating. You need to get online. You're too picky. Stop with all of that stuff. Don't go, well, sorry, we're having a couples retreat this weekend. Right. You're not invited to go. That's crazy. If that person's part of your circle, bring them along. And don't try to invite another single person that you're trying to hook them up with, because you're still giving them that message like, hey, I know how to fix you. No, just let the single person, if they're comfortable, come and join you. When all the couples are going out. With no motive of like, we're going to get you to sign up for eHarmony tonight. Like, stop that crap. Just honor the season that they are in. And don't be like, hey, we're all going out. Church people, stop this. Stop inviting the single people in your church to watch your kids while you go and do married stuff. Knock that crap off. Because, again, you think, well, it's not that big of a deal, man. They're single, or they don't have anything to do. No. That is sending the wrong, very hurtful message. Like, if you have a relationship with someone that they're like, hey, listen, I want to do that for you, that's different. But don't just go seeking out single people to be the child care at the marriage event.
Like
because
you
they don't
invite
have
them on the
nobody to come
retreat
to.
so that way they can watch your kids while you're doing it, whatever.
Knock that stuff off. Learn to honor them the way that we're going to talk in this series, that they need to learn to honor marriage. Because there's always this tension in church, and it's so ridiculous. And again, I'm at the end of like, I just don't care anymore about the tension. Like, we used to have to, like, when we would do these relationship series, if we wanted to do a week on singleness, we had to sit there and apologize to the married people for 20 minutes, and then we would do the marriage thing, and we go, I know not everyone's here married. Maybe you want to be married, so pay attention. Like, no. We all should want healthy marriages, healthy single people. So even if the sermon doesn't immediately apply to you, it should not offend you. You shouldn't tune out. There's always something that you can learn from God's word. And we need to learn to do this just across the board. Like, I've been giving the example all week to people. Like, when it used to be Mother's Day, it was a disaster for us to have to try to craft a prayer and an announcement up on the front because we wanted to celebrate the moms in the room. Because we had to hit every daggone situation that was present in the room, because we don't know how to go, yes, that's sad that you are in that situation. I'm sad that I'm in that situation. But I can still celebrate the moms in this room, because healthy moms, thriving moms are good for my community.
Yeah.
Why can we not hold that tension? It's so stinking silly. Like, you can be in pain and still celebrate simultaneously in different, like, I go to church. Yes, I'm not a mom yet, but I'm going to honor these moms because what they're doing is hard. And when they turn around and they understand your singleness or your emptiness or whatever it is, they go, that's also hard. Why can we not just learn to, and we don't have to sit here and walk through on Mother's Day. Well, we are so sorry if today is a difficult day for you. No, why would you on the second biggest Sunday of the year, Mother's Day, normally, why would you bring the emotion way down to go, well, maybe you lost your mother. No. Those are all sad situations, but can we just agree that on Mother's Day, we're going to celebrate the people in the room and part of our church that are just out there doing it?
Yeah.
And then we will have another time where we can grieve for whatever it is that's going on. It's the same thing with the singleness. Can you just go to the wedding and celebrate with your friends and family, and then maybe later the next week find another trusted friend that honors your singleness that you can sit there and cry to? You are allowed to do both of those things. You do not have to choose between them, and we should not have to tiptoe around celebrating people to not offend others in the church.
Yeah.
That may be how you have to do life out in the world, because people that aren't sold out to Jesus, of course they're offended. Of course they are. So that might have to be how you do things out in the world. But when it comes to the people of God, this is not the way that we're supposed to operate. And like I do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to play that game.
Somewhere along the way, it's like we forgot that we are created as complex individuals where you can hold two emotions at the same time.
Yep.
Like, that's one of the things that I feel like we have forgotten, that you can hold grief and joy at the same time.
Yep.
And you can feel both things at the same time. It's what you allow yourself to be dominated by and your actions to be dominated by and how you interact with others that matters. But singleness does not make you incomplete. This was one of those points that I was like, you have to keep some of this stuff in here, because I do believe, like, from Disney princess movies and everything else that, like, in our culture we have seen, it is one of those things that it's almost like, I mean, we'll say, oh, this is my better half, or this is my, whatever. We say all those things all the time, and it's like, well, really? Because you are also a whole individual. Yeah. And just because when you get married, yes, to become one, all those things, but, like, you are still your own person. Yeah. And the stuff that you got into it with in that point was something I think that is timely and that many people have to hear, like, need to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I heard from someone right after first service that was actually listening online on their way up here because they had to serve second service and didn't want to miss the sermon. And she said when I hit that point, that in her car, the tears just started streaming down her face, because she's like, people don't talk like that in the church to the single people. Like, I heard from a guy right after first service, he goes, nobody's ever talked about singleness in any church I've ever been in. And, I mean, you could just see it in people's faces, like, nobody does this, and nobody reminds me, like, I'm not on the JV team just because I'm not married. Right. Because that's it. Again, I don't understand how we ever got to that place in Christian circles, especially, that we treat marriage as the ultimate value, and then we diminish anyone that's not there and make them feel like they are less than or incomplete or any of that sort of stuff. And the whole reason why we have to have a point like that is because the single people in the church actually believe that about themselves on some level, because whether it's through overt or subliminal messaging that's been given to them to them by people around them, or even from the stage in a lot of ways, they get that idea, like, man, I'm not, like, we're looking for someone to complete us or something like that, and like all these like fairy tale stories and all this. It's like it's just feeds this whole idea that you're not good on your own, and truthfully, that's actually true. Yeah. But the only one that fixes that is Jesus.
Right.
It's not somebody else that also has that same need for the Lord. That's the only thing that will ever complete them. That's the only thing that will ever complete you. You cannot complete each other. This is why so many people come into marriage with all this hope that, oh man, she's going to complete me. He's going to complete me. And then everything will be okay. And it's like, no. That's not how it works. All you did was take all of your dysfunction and now marry it to their dysfunction. That's all that you did, because you didn't take time to become a healthy person on the front end. Again, I said it Sunday. If you don't really care much for yourself or think very highly of yourself, why in the world do you think somebody else would?
Yeah.
Why in the world would you put that pressure on somebody else?
Yeah.
Hey, I hate myself. Could you make me love myself somehow? Who in the world could possibly do that for you?
Yeah.
You are not incomplete whatsoever. You are good solely with God. Like just solely with God, you are good just how you are. You don't need anything else other than Jesus. Like, you are complete. This is Colossians 2:10. This was my memory verse from our personal Bible study last week. Like, you are complete in Him, in Christ. Everything you need. So if you've ever gotten some sort of message in your head like, man, I need to get married to really, it won't work. If you got two people that think that they're missing something going into a relationship, it's going to get bad.
Yeah.
Really, really quick.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to realize that person actually can't do that for me.
Yeah. And if you don't like yourself heading into the relationship, it doesn't make you like yourself suddenly.
No, you're actually going to learn more about yourself and dislike yourself more
Yes.
if you're not healthy going into the relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Because being in relationships has a way. This is what friendships are like this. Good work relationships are like this. Marriage, dating is like this. When you get into relationship with somebody, then you actually start to see and hear, hopefully hear from them even the stuff that you couldn't see before you were in that relationship. So if you didn't like yourself beforehand, go get into a relationship, find out all the ways that you really are like broken and still need healing in certain areas, and then see how you feel about yourself. It compounds the problem.
Yes.
It doesn't make the problem better. So we need to, and this was the final point, really, like, you need to take time to get yourself healthy, and then you need to proceed very slowly. Very slowly.
Yeah.
That's why I talked to I've talked to my kids about this. When I was growing up, it wasn't a big deal to be like, oh, we got boyfriends and girlfriends and all this crap. I'm like, don't even talk about that in my car.
Yeah.
Don't talk about that in my house. Because I feel like I started into that whole realm way too early. And it's like it was like I was trying to sprint to the end of the race as fast as I could. And I was like, no, listen. You need to grow as a person for a long time before you decide to introduce somebody else into that. You need time where you can focus on your relationship with the Lord, where you can heal from anything that childhood has damaged or broken in you. Like, you need that time. And if you just rush into, I'm not saying that all dating is bad. I'm just saying you need to take your time. Do not rush, because if you rush, you put yourself in a situation where, and this is hard to articulate from the stage, because, again, you want to be really sensitive to people. But if you have a strong conviction about the sanctity of marriage, which as a Christian you should, because God ordained it, God made it, God ordained it. Like, here's what I want to say, and I'm going to say this later in this series, even more pointed. As much of a fuss as the Christian church made over DOMA being overturned, which is the same-sex marriage stuff that under Barack Obama, as much of an uproar as I saw on Facebook from the Christian community over that, why do we not see an equal uproar over the divorce and remarriage happening in God's church?
Yeah.
Why do we not? Because you're picking and choosing who you want to pick on at that point.
Yeah.
I don't have any issue saying I do not support same-sex marriage, because I am equally as staunch on the divorce issue in the church and the remarriage issue in the church, which is a major problem to me.
Yeah.
Like, for me personally, this is something I've learned and grown in. If somebody, I'm not saying whatever happened before me and you came in contact, I will let the bygones be bygones. Not all pastors will do that, but I will. But if you do it under my leadership in my church that I've been called to lead, if you divorce for a reason other than why the scriptures say that you ought to, there's a very, very good chance I will not be part of that next marriage.
Yeah.
I will not do the marriage counseling. I will not do the ceremony, because we need to stand our ground if we're going to talk about the sanctity of marriage. We need to talk about the sanctity, because this is what the opponents of all right, so if we're on this side of same-sex marriage, the opponents in that, they're going, why do you all not equally condemn divorce, since you're using the Bible to say that this is wrong?
Right.
And the Bible talks about this being wrong, but you don't do it both ways. You cannot have it both ways.
Right.
You have to hold the line. If you're going to talk sanctity of marriage, then talk about sanctity of marriage.
Yeah.
And it's painful and it's hurtful, because a lot of people do a lot of foolish stuff out of ignorance.
Yeah.
They don't understand what the scriptures have to say about marriage. They don't understand what the scriptures have to say about divorce. And then they get themselves into these situations and they act in ignorance, or they'll go like, well, we think that this is really bad, but we don't think divorce is that bad. And so they'll be like, the lesser sin then would be to divorce. Then what? It's like, no, listen. Like one of the, I didn't read this. There's a passage in Malachi that says God hates divorce. There's not a whole lot of things in the scripture that God says that he hates. Divorce is on the list.
Yeah.
And the church does not seem to care that much.
Yeah.
Like either the church doesn't care, or the church is filled with people that are not actually committed to Jesus.
Right.
That's the only two options. I don't like either one of them, but again, if you, I know you can hear in my tone of voice, I'm serious about this. That it bothers me that we would pick on same-sex marriage as something to oppose, at the same time not equally oppose divorce and remarriage in the church, which is why we're going to be talking about it later in this series, because that's why you don't rush in.
Yeah.
That's why you don't rush in, because I said it Sunday. You don't haphazardly come into it, because you cannot haphazardly come out of it. Because even if you think that there's a biblical mandate that says, oh, no, it's fine if I do this or whatever, listen, even if you can do all the Bible gymnastics in the world to allow yourself to divorce for no fault or for irreconcilable differences and then go and remarry someone, even if you can do all the Bible gymnastics in the world to flip yourself around passages, what you did to your heart, soul, mind, and body when you severed a tie that God brought together, you have no idea the lasting implications that will have on you and every future relationship that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think that it is very important and needed to say within the church, because I think, like, in the time that you and I have been pastors here, we've seen it. Like, we've seen the families get torn apart. We've seen the people who've rushed in for one reason or another and it not work out. Like, we've seen those things, and we don't want to see any more of it.
It's
like, and it's one of those things, but I think this comes back to, like, when you see those single people getting it right, working on themselves, doing that stuff, celebrating those things. That's why I have one friend who I am like constantly trying to encourage, because I'm like, look, like I'm trying to celebrate those small things with her and be like, listen, you are doing the hard work right now. I was like, I know that it's hard and that you're sad and you're lonely. I get that, but let me tell you what you're doing that I wish I would have done.
Yeah.
Like, let me tell you how this is going to help you in your future. Like, it's a really cool thing to see. And even like our group is made up of kind of 50-50 singles and married people. But last night we had the majority were single people, and it was really cool to hear their perspectives and hear just the different points that you brought out. And I won't share details because I can't, because of group rules. But I will say that it was really encouraging and cool to see and hear the different perspectives and where they're at between, wanting to work on themselves more, and all of those things, and seeing it and recognizing like what you've said from week one to this week of how they're implementing that. Yeah. And I think that it's a beautiful thing. And so like last night for me was a bit more like celebratory with them, because I thought like you all are doing it. Like you're getting there. Like it's hard. but you're doing the work.
Yeah.
And I believe that God honors the work that we put in.
Anybody that doesn't want to do the hard work of getting healthy on the front end, please talk to me, and I will get you hooked up with one of our couples here at the church that are in a miserable marriage, and let them talk to you about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All you got to do is talk to one person that's been through it, and you go, "Oh, this is serious. This is serious." Again, I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody's current situations. I'm just saying, go ahead and add some kids into it too.
Yeah.
That's what makes this everything gets so much messier
Yeah.
when you do not do things God's way.
Yeah.
I'm not saying kids that come from homes of divorce cannot be well-adjusted, good citizens and Christians and all that. I'm just saying, ask those kids what it was like to go through that, to have to spend 1 week at this house and 1 week at this house. And because we don't follow God's design, like we have premarital sex, so we end up with people that have kids that are not married, and those kids are loved and made in the image of God and all of that sort of stuff. But when those two people decide, hey, we're not even married, so we're going to split up, find out what that does to that kid. When two parents decide we just can't get along, so we're going to split up, we think that we'll be better separate. No. Look at all the studies. All the studies. Everything fights against this.
Yeah.
Look at the damage that is being caused because people just simply will not do things God's way. I am passionate about it because I want to save you and your kids the heartache. Because, I already get it. Somebody yesterday will hear that sermon and go, Pastor said, once again, Christians only marry Christians. But what about my situation? I'm already in a relationship with someone that's not a Christian. We got kids together. We live together. What am I supposed to do now? Because are you telling me not to marry the father or the mother of my kids? The reason why everything gets so messy is when we don't do things God's way, it does get messy. So then now I make a statement from a stage and you go, I don't even know how that applies to me. Well, that's because now that's a situation. Now we got to have a separate conversation that was never meant to be had. And again, it's not to throw shade or make you feel shame or disgraced for the fact that you didn't do it God's way. I didn't do things God's way. And I have scars to this day, like on my soul, on my mind, on my body from not doing it God's way. So I'm just trying to say I get it, but and again, this is why I'm always about your future, not your past. If you will do things God's way, He has designed it in a way to shield you from unnecessary pain as well as from inflicting unnecessary pain on innocent bystanders like your kids.
Yeah. And I wish that the church we grew up in, I can't say every church, but I think for both of us, had done a better job of helping us understand that those things, the way that God designed it and His way wasn't because He doesn't want you to have joy and good things and pleasure in life. It is to protect you. It is for those things. Like I wish somebody would have sat down with me and shared with me their heartache, their scars, their things that they went through to say, listen, because of this. I sat at lunch with a young teen who was thinking about moving in with her boyfriend of 2 months. And I just shared with her. I just shared with her all my, the worst case scenario of things that I had happen to say, look, do not do this. There's a reason why you should not do this. And it's to keep you from things like what happened to me happen to you. I
would have thought God hated sex as growing up in the church that I did. I would have thought, man, He hates this. Come to find out, He's the author of it.
Yes.
And He is for it. And yet, I would have thought that it's something that I was never to engage in, ever. Because it's so horrible, awful, and nasty. Yeah. That you're only you better only do it once or twice the way you can have one or two kids.
Who struggle with being able to be intimate in their marriage because of the view that they were given in that way.
Yeah, nobody warned me. Don't do this stuff because you don't realize that what you look at when you're 12 years old, you're going to think about when you're 38. Nobody warned me of that. Yeah. Everyone was, don't do it or you're going to go to hell. Yeah. Well, that's not a very big motivating factor for me whenever I'm 12 years old. Right. I'm not certain that anything would have been because I was quite stubborn, But I'm just saying, nobody warned me that images and habits that I picked up in my teens would still be a problem for me 20 years later, 15 years into a relationship with Jesus, and still struggling in a lot of the ways because I broke myself in my teen years. And nobody warned me about that. Nobody said, don't do it not so the way you won't go to hell. Don't do it not because you don't want to get grounded. Don't do it because you don't want to deal with the ramifications literally for the rest of your life. And before someone comes in and goes, God can take care of that and all that, I fully believe he can. I'm also telling you my experience. I'm 38 years old, and I'm still struggling with stuff I've been struggling with since I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
And I've been following the Lord for 15 years. Yeah. So either the problem's with me or the problem's with God. Or the problems with the choices I made previously.
I think we have to remember, just because he can doesn't mean
exactly.
He always will. Just because he can and he does forgive doesn't mean that you don't face the consequences still.
Yeah, I got in a car wreck when I was in high school. I still have the scar on my arm.
Yeah.
For some reason, he didn't take that away.
Jesus still had the scars, right?
Yeah. So it's like I don't want to act as if God cannot fully wipe something from your mind, like whatever it might be. But I'm also going to say I think sometimes maybe he doesn't, as almost that 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, Paul, he's got a thorn in his flesh, and he asked God to take it away multiple times, and God won't. We don't know what it was, and every pastor I've ever heard says God left it open-ended, that way it could be yours.
Yes.
Whatever it was, it's yours. Yeah. So I'm just like, this is not coming from some place of don't do this or else you're going to go to hell. God's going to be so mad at you. Please follow God's design for singleness and marriage and everything else, because it safeguards you from unnecessary pain.
Yeah, and just as God, we want what's best for you, because 100%. We've been on the other side of it. And I think that's what sometimes I believe, that we're allowed to struggle with things because it helps us to have that compassion and understanding for others, but also to share our story to help others see the danger of it and the safeguard. So with that, I think the key takeaway is to really just dig in and try to follow God's way in everything that you do, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're about to get married, whatever that is. Just continue to seek after him and his ways, and you'll see that kind of relationships, the kind of relationships in life that he really has designed for you. That is it for today, but we will be right back here again next week with another extra point for you as we dive deeper into the Sunday teaching to give you more practical next steps.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.